Welcome. Today, we are doing something a little bit different. We're going to have a panel talk here with three experts in the agent AI space, specifically focused on the customer experience use case. Today, I'm joined by Arthur Wu, Ilai Szpiezak, and Mathew Goldsborough. Thank you for joining today, everybody.
Great to be
Thank you.
here. Thanks for having us, Ben.
So I wanted to start off the conversation by addressing the elephant in the room. AI agents versus human agents. So what are some of the key differences that you see in delivering a customer experience? And when is a hybrid model kind of the best of both worlds? Mathew, if you could start with this one and then we'll go around.
Sure. Yeah, thanks again for having us, Ben. I feel very strongly and passionate about this one, actually, that it's not about replacing jobs. It's about augmenting capability and allowing agents or customer service professionals, or even customers themselves to be more efficient, to have, more in-depth interactions with your company. To me, it's a trade-off between kind of speed and throughput versus comprehension and complexity. And so it might be fast to build an agent versus a human agent, but the more complex the queries get, what we found is sort of the lower the quality of the responses that you get, right? And so, for example, I'm traveling to Europe over the summer. It's a hellish flight. I'm based in Hawaii, so Hawaii to Europe is like days of travel. I called to help them book a ticket. A normal ticket is it's a policy update. I go to Google Flights. I book, here to San Francisco, not a problem. But now I'm in a multi-dimensional problem of I have airline policy. I want to stop over in a couple of days. I've got different flight schedules, maybe different code share carriers, different personal preferences. I like to fly United. I don't like to fly Delta, right? That's my own thing. So, while I'm assuming that agent is using some sort of AI behind the scenes, they sort of have to use a little bit of EQ and have to have a more in-depth conversation. And I think that's really where AI starts to excel. It's offloading the lower end tickets, the easier ones that are to solve, and providing a space for these really deep ones that you really need to think deeply about and solve a solution for. That's highly targeted towards what the customer wants to see.
Absolutely. Arthur, can I get your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd echo a lot of what Mathew said. And I think the trade-off is really pronounced in the sense that, some of the companies that we work with are B2C. And so there's kind of an immense amount of volume that happens. So they're not like a very simple, like e-commerce DTC company where most of the questions are just like, where is my order? A lot of the questions are actually like kind of nuanced. But in that case, what we see is that, a lot of times, like someone might be waiting, 2, 3, 4, sometimes like even like 7 days, like for an answer, like in that case. And so I think all things being equal, would you rather have an answer being, like told to you by another human being? I think we'd all probably say, yeah, like that sounds nice. But I think for the reality for a lot of businesses is that a lot of them are just like underwater. It's like not sustainable for them to, find the right human agents with the right expertise at the right time to like serve all this volume in a cost effective way. Um, and I think to that point, I think like the AI agent piece of this really does kind of just change the cost equation like a lot, especially for these L1, L2 type tickets. So totally agree with what Matthew's saying. And I think for some businesses, it's even a more stark reality that it's like it might be the only way that they can actually grow at scale.
Absolutely. Eli?
Yes, I'll add something small because I agree with both of you, but I think it's sometimes we are thinking about this technology from the point of view of the company. It's like, oh, this is disrupting for the company. It's making our CX experience 10x better. But is it from the customer perspective? Uh, that's kind of like what I like to think about. That are we actually creating a better experience for the customer? Or are we deflecting more tickets for the point of view what the company needs to save money? And I think it's really different. And I don't think there is like an or here. It should be an and. It should be like what the customer needs and what we need as an organization should be aligned. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I think it's going back to what you, Mathew, said. I think it's about augmenting and giving like superpowers to all these people that, maybe we now need the same number of people to do 3 times the number of tickets or more. Like I think that that's where the opportunity is. So I do think in the future we will have a hybrid workforce beyond here. I am almost sure, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that we are seeing that in many of the area. So I think that as we build companies and as we build functions with CX in mind, we need to be obsessed with if what we are doing actually impacts to what the customer needs. Not what they want, but what they need. And I think that kind of like that nuance is important.
Yeah. I think the success of the business is driven ultimately from what the customer experiences, and that tracking that back is not always easy. Sometimes it's a little bit of a sense that we have, or a kind of, something that's obvious but not actually measured directly. But I think everybody would agree with you that, if the customer has a good experience, that's good for the business in the end. Um, I will add to this conversation a little bit. I just want to say that I think, there's all of these concerns about new technology. I mean, when the shovel was invented, the guy that was digging with a stone, got really upset about, his stone business, going by the wayside. There's always new technology coming out, and it's always a improvement in productivity, right? Going back through the history of time. And I think it's natural for people to be anxious about losing their jobs. Whenever a new technology comes out, there's always a big change. There are some people that will get hurt. I mean, that's the reality. And it's not limited to AI by any means. But I think that if you take it as an opportunity, there's an opportunity to grow. There's an opportunity to use these tools, even if you're a level 1 tech support, if you're, a C-level leader, at all levels of the stack, there's an opportunity here. Again, mirroring Matthew's comments, the augmentation potential is massive, and it behooves all of us to seize the opportunity.
One note on that, Ben. Sorry that you just reminded me. I think I completely agree that if we were throughout history thinking, oh, this might be my misplaced, people or the way that we do things, not even the way that we do things, we would still be, with the big Macintosh, or before that. And I think that it's human factors that we tend to, as a society, go very complex with something new. So I completely agree that this is opening a new door in a good way.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me adding real quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Ben. Just to add, I think it's not about keeping things static. It's actually about expansion of the industry and expansion of revenues. And when you look at it that way, it's not about how do I serve the same amount of people or, generate the same amount of revenue with the same staff that I have. It's how do I expand my revenue 2 times, 3 times, 10 times with the same amount of revenue, which should be the way to think about it.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of different axes for doing more with less, or doing more with the same amount, right? One axis could be efficiency, but another one could be quality, right? And I think that there's an opportunity with a really finely tuned system, not only the end user experience, but this whole system that empowers the agents inside of the business, the humans inside of the business. It empowers the customers. It empowers management and leadership as well, where everybody has better access and better understanding. Now, suddenly there's opportunities that are opening up. It's not only faster, but it's also better, hopefully. Great. So I wanted to talk a little bit to this point about how do you actually dial in your process around the tool. So you have a great agent AI tool. There's a whole bunch of providers, talking to some of them today, my company included. But whatever tool you choose, what are the capabilities for managing and orchestrating AI in CX? That could be steering the AI, monitoring the tone, monitoring the quality of answers. How do you get insights and act on that? And how can organizations sort of make sure that they have visibility and control? And I'd like to start this one with Arthur.
Yeah, no, I think this is the thorniest topic right now, when it comes to deploying AI and CX. I think that the worst way this can show up for a customer is if like the AI is just this big black box and they get a bunch of customer questions one day, and then it just spits out all these answers like the next day, and like maybe you're kind of manually looking at each response in a spreadsheet sort of a thing to see what's going on, and then oh wait, you add a new knowledge base article, well, like, how does that get factored into that black box? Like, how does it not? So I think it can be really overwhelming. But I mean, like us as like vendors, like I feel like, we of course we have a hard job building our solution. I think buyers have an even harder job, honestly, of evaluating like which deployment makes sense, and then also how do you like maintain and steer that over time. So the way I think it should be done, and would love to, like gut check this against y'all. But the way I think it should be done is really making it clear the steps the AI system is performing. So for us, it's like pretty simple. In order to generate a response, we have to first like gather all the relevant information about a customer. We also need to triage, read the intent of a message, triage it appropriately, decide whether or not we can use the information that we gathered to actually answer that question, or if it should just be routed to a human instead. And then, of course, if it's routed to like the rest of the response generation process, then let's generate that response. And at each one of those steps, we think about ways to make it really transparent, like to like the user or the customer support agent as to what's happening. In software engineering, we kind of like to throw around this idea of like a stack trace. Like, what are all the steps that are happening in the system, so that you can audit exactly like what's going on. And now, does that mean that like, for a support operations person, are they going to have to be auditing a stack trace like all day? Not necessarily, but I do think that there should be, and I think that's where the craft in the product comes. It's like, how do you decide like what level of detail and transparency you want to show like to your end customer? And also, how do you let them change or update logic or rules on their own without necessarily needing code? And so maybe to just kind of like just close with this one example, in our triage system, for example, we make it really easy for someone to basically define their own triage rules of, hey, like you should accept tickets like this, you should reject or route this type of ticket to a human directly, and making it really, really easy for people to configure these rules, set up multiple rules, like, change them around, etc., assign some of them more priority or some of them less. And so that's kind of on the transparency side. But I think the most important thing really is evals. It is always, always about evals, in my opinion. And what I mean, and I can go into a lot more detail about this. But basically the idea of an eval is you should have like a test set of maybe like 500 tickets, for example, of incoming customer questions. You should know for each one, should the bot actually respond to that, or should it be routed to a human? If it does decide to respond to it, you should actually like write in what is the like desired response that you want. And then anytime that you make any changes to your AI system or rules, you have to be testing that against what that like scorecard of evals is, like really. That's the only way you actually understand, hey, like maybe like should we try this new like OpenAI model, or should we try Gemini or something like that, or should we like change some of the logic here? The only way you know if those changes make sense is if you compare them against how they score on your eval like scorecard, essentially, compared to like what you maybe had like a week ago. So getting a lot more detail about that. But if I were to sum it up, I think it's about showing the right level of transparency to the customer, but also evals. Evals is the most important thing in my opinion, and also kind of the hardest. And I see kind of Mathew nodding a lot here, so I'm really curious your take on this. And I feel like both you and Eli like must have encountered the same thing, or if not, I'd love to know that too.
Yeah, let's go to Mathew next, and then we'll hear from Eli on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with probably 90% of what you said, Arthur. The one thing I'd actually say from a user experience standpoint, not a CX standpoint, we actually need to be sort of hiding the wires. So there's a level of traceability and transparency that I think we need as operators, as engineers, as you get a ticket in, something breaks, you got to know what happens. That's sort of the back of the house type of stuff. But I from the conversations that we've had with customers and clients is that they actually don't care about the AI. Like the AI is something that facilitates, it's a means to an end. So they don't want to necessarily know that they're talking to an AI. They just want to get to their answer more quickly, right? So that's part of it. But I think you're 100% right around the how you route it and the complexity that's under the hood is really challenging to implement well. And so there's the, hey, do I route it to a human or an AI, right? On the AI side, is something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and implementing different things for is, when it comes in and gets routed to an AI, which AI do you route it to? And does your platform actually have that capability to say, hey, do I send it to Claude, or do I send it to Gemini, or do I send it to ChatGPT? We've actually found that all of them are non-deterministic. So you ask the same question, you get different answers back. So how do you provide that level of reliability and abstract that away from the end user to provide a good user experience? And then some of the LLMs answer questions better than others. So a certain type of question, Claude may formulate a response better than Gemini or versus ChatGPT, right? So you sort of have to have the platform built that supports that desired customer experience around it. And not many people from what I've seen are thinking about it in that way. And then of course you deal with, hey, you get the fail whale from any one of the three vendors, right? They go down. You sort of have to deal with that from a software standpoint. So you're building conventional software on very unreliable LLMs and unreliable APIs that give you very random responses. It's a very hard software challenge to solve. But I think when it comes down to it, it's monitoring dashboards for the team, being able to track, performance metrics. How long did it take to respond? How long did it take to escalate to a certain person? And really, I view, once you get to an operational standpoint, I view the goal of the software is to be able to escalate to a user, or to sort of indicate when something breaks, not necessarily provide the in-depth dashboards on and low-level metrics on everything. It's more of a respond to an anomaly type setup.
I'm sorry, I'm just digesting a lot of information on this question. I'd say that for us, we actually, I'll give a real example. When we started to build our own platform, we thought we would just plug it into an LLM, an X, let's say, LLM X, and then we would say, okay, great. And then we will give all this data and we will have X plus something output. And it was completely rubbish. And it was really not what we expected, what the customer expected in the end of the day. So we actually learned very much to what, like you said, Mathew, that I would call it almost like a layer over layer over layer. I know that software is that since the very beginning, but now even more, because like we actually are using, I think, 4 or 5 different models for different tasks within, the app. And that came from testing and evaluating many different parameters and things, going back to what you said, Arthur, before. And I think the customers and the society still sees LLMs and AI as this big black box. So it is hard to take it out of that. They expect magic, like not even black hole. They expect magic. It's like, why is it not doing, something? So what is the something that you expect is the question. We want insight because we are in the insight space. We are not customer facing, so we are not doing like routing to an agent or routing to an LLM. We are kind of like trying to get the insight from that. And everybody calls an insight a different thing. And that is also something that we learn. And going back to this kind of like deployment and how companies are managing these new tools, I do believe that companies will have a new cost of operations. Maybe it's going to be, in this case, CX operations going to grow as a field, and you're going to have a lot more investment in terms of people and also resources in that, because you will need it to be able to get the output that companies expect. I am all in for plug and play tools, and we are trying to build a plug and play tool. But when you plug and play, it's not the output that everybody expects, because people are complex and customers are complex. And we should treat this as a complex problem also to solve. And so that's my small thought, given, what you both said before.
Yeah, I mean, great perspectives, everybody. I want to react to what you're saying right now, Eli. I think there's a few things there. One of the things that we're thinking about on our side is the complexity of managing these solutions. And how do clients, I would say the business client of us, a provider, how do they want to handle this problem? How do they want to approach this? And it definitely depends on the client. And it's kind of the classic, you know, caveat or cop out in business is it depends. But basically, I think that some organizations have tech savvy. They're kind of AI forward organizations. They're going to have an operations person. They're going to have an engineer that they can dedicate to this problem. And other organizations are not in that place. And it's not really relevant so much to the size of the organization. This could be big or small. But I think some teams, they want to have a managed solution. So the operations challenge is definitely growing. The kind of support operations, right? Support engineer. I think these roles are going to be on the rise for at least the next few years, probably longer into the future, because of the complexity of these systems that we're all talking about. But I think that there's an opportunity, and one facet of our approach is to provide some of that operations and engineering as a service together with the tool. And so that there's a level of, you know, kind of it's automatically done for you, where maybe they don't want to get into the nitty gritty of, you know, picking the right LLM and, you know, managing a flaky API and like all these kinds of things. But there are organizations that want to do that, right? There are companies that are really engineering heavy. They're really good at this, and they just see it as another opportunity, you know, to leverage the staff they already have. And I think that challenge is a deep one, and the companies that get it right are going to see big advantages. Any final thoughts on this topic from the panel?
Go, Arthur. Go for it. I saw you there going to say something.
No, I mean, I think this like segues really nicely into like the build versus buy conversation. I mean, honestly, it's funny. I feel like at some of, especially like a SaaS company where like maybe their offering is I'll take like Gusto, for example. Like Gusto is like a payroll company, like in like based in the US, and they work with like a staggering number of like SMBs like running their payroll. And they have like hundreds and hundreds of engineers, and many of them are dedicated within their CX org to exactly tackle this problem. At the same time, I think I'm sure we all have customers where the support team has never like maybe talks with their engineer, maybe gets like an hour of their time every quarter of one person's time, maybe. And so then we have to come in with a very strong opinion about what the right deployment looks like. We have to embed pretty closely with their team to make sure it's right. It's a very different model. And in that case, like they can never entertain the idea of build. So I think I'm getting ahead of myself here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a second. But that's just like what your words kind of resonate with me on, Ben.
And I know them that Arthur just kind of like, you know, add to the fire. And I think that nice is from that time that we realized that it's much more complex to deploy AI agents, non-agents, AI products in production. We managed to achieve what we believe is as a provider in CX, it's magic and it feels magic, and you know, and I think that is really, really important. And I do believe in the end of the day, it comes down to great engineering, that it's not about great AI. AI is part of the engineering, but it's about great engineering that needs scale, that needs to be reliable at scale, that needs to work in production with real data, with real customers. Every product will look beautiful with a contained environment, with specific selected number of tickets that say what you want to say. But when you put that in the wild, wild west of the world, it's very, very different. And I think that's where magic happens. That's where the power of great engineering with AI is tested to make sure that it can deliver not what the customer actually, again, wants, but what they need and more. Because today we should be thinking about 10x, we should be thinking about 100x plus, because it's possible. Like that augmentation needs to be hitting those figures, I believe.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think that's right on point. And you know, there's just fundamentals that are undeniable, that will always be true whenever you're building technology. You know, I think on this point, one more comment on steering before we move on to build versus buy here. There's been some stories of early deployments, I would say maybe in the last 6 months to a year, where the AI responses kind of went off the road and you know gave somebody like a super discounted plane ticket or a free plane ticket or something like this, where the way that AI works, the way that these LLMs work is it's really in its raw state, it's not bounded by any kind of rules or guidelines. And the upside is definitely there. I mean, I agree 100x upside, but preventing downside is, I think, really a critical concern of a lot of companies. And if you guys, anybody wants to chime in quickly on this one, what do you think about, kind of avoiding the worst case scenarios, um, yeah, and steering away from some of the problems that are possible?
For sure. I think I mean, I think this is the most counterintuitive thing about engineering and AI. It's like sometimes solutions just throw more AI at it. And what I mean by this is we have like a guardrail step, for example, where it's like for some customers, like maybe they don't ever feel comfortable that the chatbot is ever offering a discount or a refund or a credit or anything like that. In any of those cases, if the bot ever generates a response that contains something like that, it should immediately quarantine that response from ever getting out. And then also, send like a Slack notification so that like a human member can review it. But the general idea is that you have this like kind of last guardrails pass that it might be like one of the last steps or the final step, like in your LLM system. So it's kind of a basic idea, but I do think that that's where you still get the benefit of, like, we don't possibly know all the different generations that AI is going to respond with. So oftentimes one of the best solutions is to just slap another like guardrails layer on it, honestly. I saw Mathew nodding a lot there too. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I love the way you mentioned that. And one of the things that we've been doing internally, we've actually put we've coined this, and we've been calling them deep agents. And so in the way that, deep learning was really machine learning built on machine learning built on machine learning, we've coined deep agents, which is really agents built on agents built on agents. So it never goes well with the customer when you talk about it this way and you say like, oh, we use AI to build the AI to make the AI better. And they're like, what are you talking about? But that's really where the industry is right now. I think if you're using these tools and you're, deep in the technicals and you're trying to figure out why an agent or a prompt or something isn't working the right way, you're actually using AI to refine the AI and it's making things better. And that's very abstracted for the customer. But really, as the operators and the folks that are building these platforms, I'm assuming it's the same thing for Ilai and for you, Arthur, and for you, Ben. But it's we're using AI on a day-to-day basis to make our lives easier, to make better AI tools, so to build our businesses.
And I'll say something on the other side also. I have a real case scenario that to try to also build that consistency on what the AI is giving us an output, or the agent, deep agent, I'll call it now. I like that term, by the way. I'm going to use that. So to get that consistency, sometimes we try to use AI, but sometimes the answer is non-AI related to be able to get that really counterintuitive kind of like action. So yeah, I think that we are all using AI to make our AI better, and each of us for the use case that is being used. And I do believe that more and more we will have more specialized deep agents doing a specific task within a very long process of many things to achieve. But within that one task, there will be a very complex process behind the scenes. Like we have a 9-step that Dolphin does to be able to get to an answer in the end, whatever that is. And I love it because customers sometimes come and say, it's like, oh, can we not just plug it to ChatGPT? And be my guest and try it. Let's hopefully it's going to have a good output. So I think that I really like that idea of deep agent because it is really about a flywheel or constant improvement to be able to make it better. Don't know. That's the only way that I could describe it.
Yeah, I think that maybe the average person in the world today doesn't really understand all the layers in the stack or all of these steps in the flywheel. I think all of us here are probably already using AI coding tools, um, probably using different levels of AI in our solutions, and that's really normal in our world today with with technology. So I think the solutions that we're hearing about today, the approaches that we're hearing about today, are ahead of the curve, but definitely going to become the norm, I think. And I wanted to, at this point, we've gotten pretty heavy into the AI topic here. I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at the panel and just say, what are some things where AI is not the right solution, or what are some things that you feel like are going to go in? What are some opportunities almost? What are some things that are going to go in the other direction? AI is going to handle a whole set of problems over here. That's great. We all love that. But what are some things that are maybe going back to an older way of doing things, or more of an analog way of doing things? Just a few quick thoughts here if you guys would like to chime in.
I think I think if there's a CX relationship where it really depends on there's not an SOP written for it. Like it's not a situation or a complex situation that might be a special issue with a really unique client where maybe your years of past relationship with that client. I'm thinking I don't know, even wealth management or a concierge, for a really particular type of thing, or a really deep B2B SaaS relationship, for example. It's really, really hard to systematically feed all that context into the AI for it to know how to do the right thing. Or there may not be a prior playbook for how it should handle that thing either. I think the AI could come up with a good answer, but I think it's not as defensible as a human handling that. And so in that case, I think for those more types of special relationships that require a lot of really deep context that don't have prior examples, I think that still has to be done by a human for the foreseeable future.
I have actually two sorts of real examples. Before building in CX, before building Dolphin AI, I founded two previous companies. One of them died because of the pandemic, funny enough, and that's how I got into tech. So I was in the events industry for over 10 years. And then after that, one of my biggest hobbies was dance. And I travel all around the world teaching dance workshops. This is real, guys. Sorry. I'm a tech founder, but I'm also a dancer and choreographer. It's weird. Sorry. But I actually, at least today, I can't see, and maybe I'm not the right person to build in that industry, and that's what I'm not building there, and I moved into, a different industry, but I can't see why, if I'm putting together my wedding, I would offload that or part of that to an AI. I want humans to be part of that process, and not just part, but 99.999% of the process. I want it to be by humans because of how important that is for me in my life. I've done over 1,000 events in my life. I wish I had an AI myself to help me in that sense. But from a customer perspective, there's no way that I believe anyone would have want not a human from the other side to take on that. And from a entertainment perspective, also, from a dance perspective, I was teaching all around the world, and I think that having that offloaded to a non-human, at least today, I can't see it working. Again, going to that specific use case. And I know that I completely went off the ticketing and, answering deep agent, but these industries are huge. And probably they will also lag in getting into the new technology because of those nuances that the customers require in those specific industries.
Yeah, just to dovetail on what Ilai said, it's for me, it's things that require that personal touch, that require high levels of EQ, or really creativity, right? I heard somebody say in a quote, it was probably on some podcast I listened to, right? It was like, I'm a painter. I don't want AI to paint for me. I don't want AI to do image generation. I don't want AI to be the creative one. Like, I want to be the creative one. I want AI to do everything else in my life, right? And so I think there's an aspect of the creativity that is depending on the use case, right, is not appropriate for AI. And then there's other things where I think, to what Arthur said, we are inherently social beings. And so when you have something that's, the biggest moment in your life, you're talking about event planning, Eli, like, I'm going to go plan my wedding. I'm going to go have this special day. I don't want to I'm sure there will be some people that want to do that fully AI, right? I get that. But for me, if I was doing that whole process with my wife, and I didn't have a human touch to like sit there and like actually pick their brain on things and ask these random thoughts and questions that came to my head that an AI probably wouldn't answer well, you lose a little bit of the magic there. So I think it's the creativity and the high EQ things that really stand out as things that humans should keep doing, and let AI handle all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with everyone's comments, and I'll add one perspective on this topic. Just been thinking as I've been listening here, but um, I think of an analogy of going to a library and asking a librarian for their advice on finding books about a subject when you're starting out, right? When you're just getting started. And I think once you've kind of gotten a little bit familiar with the subject, you can go and do your own research. You use Google, you use ChatGPT, you use whatever you like. But there's something really magic about going and talking to a librarian when you're just getting started. And they give you that first book, and then you open that up and you start to get into the world from a really a personalized entry point, I want to say. And we often talk about handover from an AI agent to a human agent. But I think there's actually an opportunity, especially if you have like a new customer coming into a business, make the handoff the opposite way. Start with the human agent, give them that personalized introduction, their first interaction, personalized human connection. Oh yes, there is a human being at this business, right? There, I can talk to, Jane or Bob or whoever, right? Inside company ABC, and they can get me going on my journey, and then I'll go and I'll be happy to talk to the chatbot or dig into the knowledge base or whatever. But I think that there's something about introductions, especially, that are really there's an EQ benefit there. There's a human connection benefit there.
One note on that is that I know that we talk about this within startups, early stage startups, but I think applies for any stage. Going to what you said, Ben, is this idea of non-scalable things. To start something, to then make it scalable. That applies also to a relationship and to the first impression with a new customer, not just to building a startup. It actually can be applied to different places within that startup, in whichever stage they are. And I completely agree. Like, having that non-scalable touch point, sometimes it actually unlocks the scalability because it opens the door for the next thing to happen and set the expectations and, like all these qualities that we have as humans.
Definitely. Yeah, I think setting expectations is a big one. So I wanted to switch topics a little bit here. Arthur mentioned it briefly, but one of the things we have today is this topic of build versus buy when it comes to AI specifically. And so, for those of you who maybe are not from a technical background, the AI coding tools that are available today are getting more and more powerful, and you can give the AI a prompt and it will build you a landing page. It will build you a feature. Sometimes it can build you, a game or some kinds of really pretty difficult coding tasks. And there's a temptation or maybe an opportunity, depending on your point of view, to build more things internally instead of buying them from a vendor. Now, you're talking to, a panel of vendors, and I think we're all going to be a little biased towards the buy side of the equation. But I think this is the topic is, build versus buy, when and why. So for this one, again, I'd like to start with Mathew, and then we can go around.
Sure. Yeah, I think at a macro level, a lot of businesses are looking at this like a traditional software task. It's like, oh, I hire somebody to build a website. It's like a widget or a module. I give you money, you give me a website, and I read my website. AI to me, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the panel here, but is fundamentally different. It's a very complex beast of a whole bunch of different systems together. And it's for me, when you talk about the coding things real quick, I think it's going to commoditize a lot of that lower level development. I actually fear fundamentally, just a quick tangent on for entry level engineers trying to break in, you're going to have this gap that you need to overcome. Like you need to get better than the AI can code in order to find a job, because people, like you said, Ben, are just going to find tools that can build them a website, tools that can build them their little widget that they want, whatever it might be. But when you start talking about building a productized, operationalized AI system, you're talking about LLMs. We've already talked about LLM selection. There's a whole tool selection around vector databases. It's how you store your vectors on the inside. It's how you extract those on the back end. It's prompt engineering. And then you get all those things together, and there's more to AI, of course. And then you get down to the very conventional and oftentimes very complex conventional software things of DevOps, cloud infrastructure. How do you make this run well? So I fear, and we've actually had this conversation with a number of clients where they're like, oh, I could just go build this myself. And so, yeah, you can build a proof of concept. You can build a prototype that answers questions based on your policies, but it may not be consistent, may not be reliable. And then it's like, how do I deploy it? How do I do these things? And it's a whole, down the rabbit hole of technical challenges. And so, I actually find interesting. I'll leave you guys with two things. I'd love to hear the other panelists here, where we found a stat that we reference a lot, where Gartner came out with a study a couple of years ago that said 80% of these AI applications and products that get built actually never make it into production. And I think it's because of these challenges here, where you hit a point of I can't break through that wall. Like I can't get the quality up. I can't figure out why I'm not getting the right data. And then businesses just throw up their hands. And as it gets back to the buy versus build, I'm a big fan of, I watched a video on Jeffrey Moore a number of years ago. He wrote Crossing the Chasm. He did a whole thing on core versus context, right? Where core is like, what does your business do? What do you differentiate? Go do that. Everything else you should just kind of integrate or buy or don't invest in, right? And I'm of course oversimplifying, but if it's core for you to build an AI platform for you to sell your services, like go build it, right? Go do it yourself. Own that technology, own the IP. But if you're selling, for very simplistic sake, t-shirts on an e-commerce website and you want to layer in AI, don't make the $100, $200, $300, $400,000 investment on engineers to go build it, because it's not going to be worth it for your business. Like go focus on what you do well and sort of outsource the rest of it. That's kind of how I feel about buy versus build.
Absolutely. Let's go to Eli, and then we'll close with Arthur on this one.
I was just making some notes because I was thinking about so many things while you were speaking, Mathew, and I didn't want to forget. And I believe that there are some degree of products, tools that will probably be able to be built inside of companies, and they should try it and they should do it. I think it's also becoming easier to get to that 20, 30, 40% of what a product is or could look like by just trying to build it. But going from 40% to 100% at scale in production that delivers the value that the customers in the end need, not from that tool, but from the actual task or product that the company or service the company sells. Going back to what you said, Mathew, it's a huge investment of building, maintenance, development, testing, taking people from doing something else that is back to you, core to the business, to try to build something that might not be core, but adds to delivering a better experience or delivering that core function. So I think it's almost like an opportunity cost, plus also the hidden task, the tact from LLMs and AI that a lot of companies are not thinking about, plus the fact that, again, going back to 20, 30%, maybe it's okay as an hackathon internally that a company can do. But to the company that I'm speaking with, Mathew, I have these conversations also like you, and sure Arthur also like with customers on a weekly basis. When I hear someone trying to say maybe we can just build it internally, and my answer is like, be my guest, like, and you will call me in 6 months when you didn't achieve what you needed and your customers are complaining, and I will be miles way ahead to what I'm now, even though now I'm ahead to the company in this specific, niche task, because we are just focusing on doing this one thing the best, whatever that one thing is. Because in that
Absolutely.
sense, why Netflix is doing movies, and if they are building on top of Amazon, not Amazon just, goes and buys Netflix, even though they have, like everybody can just build anything. Yes, but you still have different companies that do different things. So
Absolutely.
there's an example with Klarna, that they try to do their CRM, and I think that we'll see in 2-3 years that they will come back to whatever CRM they will use. Anyway, I think
Um,
that's what is going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, specialization, right? Arthur, just briefly, closing thought on this one before we sign off for today.
Yeah, I mean, I think both like Matthew, Eli, I feel like you guys took the words out of my mouth. I absolutely agree with the core versus not core, and I think that within customer experience, I think it's really easy to conflate like, oh, like if we offer a singular best customer experience, therefore everything we do to achieve that must be unique in our own way, and that kind of flows into AI, but that actually doesn't really make any sense. Like no one's rolling their own help desk software, like period. And I would say that these AI systems are even more complicated when it comes to infrastructure and UX. And like, sure, you want the ability to be able to like change some knobs. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you need to build literally everything from scratch. Like the companies that we talk to that decide to build something in-house usually have a dozen engineers on a 12 to 18-month timeline resource to doing something like this. That makes sense. If they already have a team full of people with the deep expertise and like close alliance with support and CX, that sounds great. But I think the reality is that most companies just don't have that luxury. I do think the exciting thing though is that like if I could close with something, I would say that folks in CX, especially folks in like a support operations role, you should try to get a bit more technical. Whether it's something like learn what a webhook is, like set up something in Zapier to help you guys maybe like sort tickets better, or like maybe do some sort of automated flow. Because that same knowledge is so critical, even for an AI system, when you might become the steward or the inheritor of an AI system in the next year, maybe in the next 6 months. And so I think just getting some technical literacy, which would be really, really helpful when you just build like a test like project or feature or POC or something, like that's still really valuable. But I wouldn't set the bar so high that's like, oh yes, like I will hand roll an AI system by myself that can achieve like a 50% deflection rate like by the end of 3 months. I think like just set the bar appropriately, and the skill transfer still very much pays off if you decide to go on a build or buy route like later on your own too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I think everybody should gain technical literacy, and it'll just help them in their process, whether they're evaluating vendors or, thinking about what they're going to build themselves or buy. Um, I wanted to point out a fact that I just love to mention, which is that something like roughly 80% of the world economy is B2B and 20% is B2C. And what that tells me is that a lot of businesses are serving a lot of other businesses. And I would extend that to this conversation, that there's a reason for that. There's a reason that those non-core things, you find a vendor, you find a partner, you find somebody else who specializes. We've seen this again and again in especially in the tech space. Every tech company has this massive tech stack where they have like 100 subscriptions for 100 other services that all do specialized things. And they get really good at those different things, and it's just a much better value to buy it. Um, from my point of view, it's not only the tool, but it's also the process, right? So if you buy a new tool, and you're also buying a process that's been honed. If you have to spin up that whole process, you have to hire the people, you have to get the right people in. Do you have that capacity? Let alone, timelines and budget and all of that, but like just the business kind of reality around like operating such a tool. So I think that, again, I'm biased. I think you should buy and not build in general. The caveats mentioned before are absolutely relevant. If somebody is, really technical, then it makes sense, to look at building it. If it's core to your business, it makes sense to building it. Totally agree. That's all of our time for today. What a great conversation. I want to really continue this. And I want to ask those of you in the audience, those of you that are going to watch and listen to this later, if you have any questions, we would love to do an asynchronous question and answer. So normally at the end of a panel like this, we'd open it up to the audience, but let's get those questions in the comments section. And if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, just mention who you want to hear from if you have a question for any of us, and we'll make sure that they see your comment and they can reply to you in the comment section as well. But thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we will continue this conversation soon. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Ben. Really enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.